two identical twins. One committed a brutal murder, but the law couldn't prove which one. DNA betrayed them both, fingerprints gave no answers, and the justice system was trapped in a nightmare. One brother was innocent. One was a killer. But how do you convict when science itself can't tell them apart? I'm Santa, and tonight I'll take you inside the chilling case of twins bound by blood, but divided by a murder that shocked everyone. It began on a rainy Thursday night in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago. The street was silent, broken only by the dripping of water from rooftops. Inside a modest two-story home, a woman named Laura had just returned from work. She lived alone, a respected nurse in her late 20s. But that night, her life ended in a storm of violence. Neighbors later reported hearing screams, loud crashes, and then silence. When police entered the house after a worried coworker called, they found a scene of horror. Laura was lying in the living room, stabbed multiple times. Blood stained the floor, and signs of a violent struggle were everywhere: overturned furniture, broken glass, torn fabric. But the detail that left investigators breathless was a single strand of hair clutched in Laura's hand. Forensic testing moved quickly. DNA was extracted. The results came back. The hair belonged to a man named David Miller. Police were ready to make the arrest, but just as the warrant was being prepared, another problem surfaced. David Miller had an identical twin, Daniel Miller, and both shared the exact same DNA profile. The case that had seemed open and shut became an impossible puzzle. When detectives questioned David and Daniel, the nightmare deepened. Both men were 29 years old, tall, fit, with the same dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Their mannerisms were nearly identical, down to the way they folded their arms or tilted their heads. To neighbors, even to friends, they were often indistinguishable. But while they looked the same, their personalities were different. David was known as the responsible one, an IT specialist, quiet, steady, who lived a relatively modest life. Daniel, on the other hand, had a reputation for trouble. He drifted between jobs, partied hard, and had a history of short tempers and broken relationships. Still, suspicion wasn't evidence. Police pressed harder. Where were they on the night of the murder? Both claimed to have been at home. Each pointed to the other, insisting that if Laura had been killed, it must have been his twin. Their alibis dissolved into smoke. Fingerprints on the crime scene matched both men because their prints, too, were identical. The strand of hair, the blood traces on the victim's clothing, all of it tied to both. DNA science had hit a wall. The media swarmed the story. The twin murder mystery. Headlines screamed. Talk shows speculated endlessly. Was David the killer hiding behind his clean-cut life? Or was Daniel the violent brother, finally crossing a line? The public wanted answers, but the justice system was paralyzed. Without clear proof, neither could be charged. Investigators refused to give up. Detective Rachel Collins, a veteran officer with a sharp eye for detail, took over the case. She believed that while science might fail, human behavior wouldn't. People left patterns. Even identical twins carried differences subtle but real. Collins pored over Laura's phone records, emails, and text messages. Buried in her call history, she found repeated late-night conversations with Dan. It wasn't proof, but it suggested a connection. Neighbors also recalled seeing Daniel outside Laura's home days before the murder. He had denied it during questioning. Still, it wasn't enough to break through the DNA wall. Weeks passed. The investigation stalled. Tension grew between the brothers. Friends said they stopped speaking to each other. Each felt the other was dragging him down. And then, a small but vital clue emerged. Detective Collins subpoenaed GPS data from both brothers' cell phones. At first, it seemed useless. Both devices had been left at their respective apartments that night. But digital forensics revealed something subtle. One phone had been used to check rideshare availability near Laura's address around the time of the murder. That phone belonged to Daniel. Police tightened the net. When they searched Daniel's apartment, they found a pair of sneakers with faint reddish stains. Initial tests showed traces of blood, but again, DNA could not distinguish if it came from Laura. Collins felt the frustration mounting, so close, yet still trapped. Then came the breakthrough. In the rush of covering his tracks, Daniel had overlooked one detail. Laura's neighbors had a security camera pointed toward the street. The footage was grainy, blurred by rain, but clear enough to capture the outline of a man leaving Laura's house that night. Both brothers looked the same, but this man carried himself with a swagger, a slouch in his shoulders, and a quick glance over his back. Detective Collins had interviewed both brothers for hours. She recognized the posture. It was Daniel. The prosecution finally had its case. In court, the defense argued furiously. How could anyone convict one twin when the science said both were possible? But prosecutors leaned heavily on behavior, circumstantial evidence, and the cell phone data. Witnesses testified about Daniel's volatile temper, his visits to Laura, his lies about not knowing her well. And the security footage, though grainy, showed a figure that experts testified matched Daniel's gait, not David's. The trial stretched on for weeks. The courtroom was tense. David sat silently, devastated, as his brother's defense crumbled. Daniel grew angrier by the day, lashing out at prosecutors, glaring at jurors. His arrogance seeped through. Finally, it was Daniel himself who sealed his fate. During cross-examination, he lost control. He shouted that Laura had humiliated him, that she deserved what happened. Gasps filled the courtroom. In that instant, the jury saw through him. The verdict was unanimous, guilty of murder. Daniel Miller was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As the judge read the sentence, David wept quietly. Two brothers, once indistinguishable, now separated forever by truth. One walked free, but broken. The other would spend his life behind bars. This case became a landmark, a chilling reminder that even science has limits, but human arrogance never hides forever. Daniel thought his twin's existence would protect him, that shared DNA made him invincible. But it was his behavior, his rage, and his mistake that exposed him. So the next time you hear about twins, remember, sometimes the bond of blood isn't enough to protect you from justice. If you liked this story and don't want to miss the next shocking case, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, if you were the judge, would you have trusted the evidence enough to convict?